the phone is in your hand. Even at Christmas dinner, even during conversations, even when you're supposed to be present, it's there. You check it. Email, messages, posts, staying connected all day. Yet something feels empty. Christmas parties fill rooms with people. Voices everywhere, laughter, movement. And right in the middle of it, that strange hollow feeling, like you're watching your own life from somewhere far away. Thich Nhat Hanh called this the suffering of our time. We feel very lonely, even if we are surrounded by many people. We are lonely together. He said, we try to fill the vacuum inside by connecting with others through devices. We check email several times a day, post messages constantly, stay busy trying to connect. But it doesn't help. The Buddha taught something different. He said home is in us, an island we must return to. Not the house you're visiting for the holidays, not where your family gathers, but something deeper. We've been disconnected from ourselves so long that we walk without knowing we're walking. We're here, but not here. We're alive, but don't know we're alive. For the next 3 hours, we're exploring the practice of going home to yourself and the freedom that comes from refreshing how you see everything. If you'd like, share where you're listening from in the comments. Wherever you are, let yourself settle. This is the practice of going home. Let's begin. Your body is doing something right now that you weren't aware of until this moment. Your heart is beating. You didn't notice it until just now, and in a few seconds, you'll probably forget about it again. Your lungs are breathing. In and out, without you having to remember or manage or think about it. Blood is flowing through thousands of miles of vessels. Cells are regenerating. Your nervous system is processing information from everything around you. All of this happening right now, and a moment ago you had no awareness of any of it. This is what it means to be gone from home. Not that anything is wrong. Not that you're doing something incorrectly, but that you can be alive, fully, physically alive, and completely unaware of that aliveness. You can walk without knowing you're walking. You can breathe without knowing you're breathing. You can be here without actually being here at all. Most people spend most of their time this way. The body does its work, keeping you alive, carrying you through the day, responding to the world around you, while the mind is somewhere else, entirely. Planning what comes next, reviewing what already happened, thinking about conversations you need to have, problems you need to solve, things you need to remember. The body is here. The mind is elsewhere, and the gap between them grows so wide you forget there's supposed to be a connection at all. The Buddha taught about this gap. He said that most people walk through their lives asleep, not literally unconscious, but not fully awake either, moving through the world in a kind of trance where the body performs its functions and the mind races from one thought to the next, and somehow the person themselves, the awareness that could be present to all of this, is nowhere to be found. He offered a practice so simple it almost sounds like nothing. Sit down and breathe. That's it. That's the revolution. Sit down, know you're sitting down, and breathe, knowing you're breathing. When you do this, when you actually sit down with the intention of being present to your body, your breath, this moment, you begin to close the gap. The mind stops racing ahead or circling back. It settles, even if just for a few seconds, into the same place the body has been all along. You are here. Your body is your breathing. Your body is your heartbeat. Your body is your feet on the ground, your hands resting wherever they are, your spine holding you upright. When you bring awareness to any of these, when you actually feel your breath moving or your feet touching the floor, you connect with your body. And when you connect with your body, you are at home. Because body is part of home. Think about how much time you spend looking at screens. An hour passes. 2 hours. Maybe more. Eyes focused, fingers moving, mind absorbed in whatever task or information or distraction the screen offers. During that time, where is your awareness? Inside the screen, inside the work, inside the endless stream of messages and tasks and content that never stops coming. The body sits there the entire time, breathing, existing, holding you upright so you can do the work. But you forget it's there. Completely. Not that you think about your body and choose to ignore it. You actually forget it exists at all, as if you were just a mind floating in front of a glowing rectangle with no physical form whatsoever. Hours can pass this way. The morning becomes afternoon. Afternoon becomes evening. And somewhere in those hours, you disappeared entirely from yourself. Your neck might be bent forward at an angle that will cause pain later. Your shoulders might have crept up toward your ears. Your breath might have become so shallow it's barely breath at all. But you don't notice any of this because you're not there to notice. Some people who practice Buddhist teachings address this directly. They set a timer. Every 15 minutes, a gentle sound plays. A bell, a chime, something soft. When they hear it, they stop. Whatever they're doing stops. The typing stops. The reading stops. The mental momentum that was carrying them from one task to the next, that stops too. They take one breath and know they're breathing. They feel their body in the chair, their feet on the floor. They notice what's actually here in this moment, the temperature of the air, the sounds around them, the simple fact of being alive. Then they return to whatever they were doing. This might sound like an interruption, like something that would make you less productive or break your concentration. But something different happens. Each time you stop, each time you remember you have a body, each time you take one conscious breath, you practice coming home. And after a while, you don't disappear so completely anymore. You're working, but you haven't left yourself behind. You're thinking, but you're also breathing. You're engaged with the task, but you haven't forgotten you're alive. The 15-minute bell becomes like a friend who gently taps you on the shoulder and says, "Remember, you have a body. Remember, you're breathing. Remember, you're here." And each time you remember, each time you return, the gap between body and mind grows a little smaller. The body is a wonder. Not because it's perfect or strong or beautiful by some standard, but because it works. Right now, as you listen to these words, your body is performing thousands of tasks to keep you alive. Your heart pumps blood. Your lungs exchange oxygen. Your digestive system processes whatever you've eaten. Your immune system identifies and responds to threats you'll never know about. Your kidneys filter waste. Your liver detoxifies. Your skin breathes and protects. Your bones support your entire structure. Your muscles contract and release with each movement you make. All of this happening automatically, whether you pay attention or not, whether you appreciate it or not, whether you even remember you have a body or not. The body doesn't ask for much. It doesn't demand constant attention or praise or acknowledgement. It just keeps working, keeps breathing, keeps you alive. And all it needs in return is that occasionally, not constantly, not even frequently, just occasionally, you remember it exists. That you notice the breath moving in and out. That you feel your feet on the ground. That you acknowledge, even for just a moment, that you are alive, and this body is what makes that possible. The practice of coming home to your body isn't complicated. You don't need special training, or perfect conditions, or a quiet monastery, on a mountain somewhere. You just need to feel your feet. Right now, wherever you are, you can feel your feet. If you're sitting, you can feel where your body meets the chair. If you're lying down, you can feel the surface beneath you. If you're walking, you can feel each foot touching the ground with each step. This isn't mystical. This isn't transcendent. This is just feeling what's actually here. But when you do it, when you actually feel your feet or actually notice your breath, something shifts. You're here. Not gone. Not lost in thought or planning or worry. Here. Present to your own life as it's actually happening, instead of thinking about it from somewhere far away. The Buddha talked about walking from one place to another, from a parking lot to an office, from your car to a store, from one room to another in your own house. For most people, this walk is just transit time. The body moves, the legs carry you forward, but the mind is already at the destination. Already thinking about what you'll do when you get there, already planning the next conversation, already rehearsing the next task. You might walk past trees without seeing them, past sky without noticing whether it's clear or cloudy, past other people without really registering they're there, because you're not there either. Your body is walking, but you, the awareness that could be present to this walk, to this moment, to this aliveness, you're somewhere else, entirely. The Buddha asked a simple question about this. Why do you continue to think, to worry, to suffer, when every step could bring you home? Every step. Not just special steps during meditation or when you're trying to be mindful. Every step you take, anywhere, anytime. Walking to the bathroom, walking to the kitchen, walking from your car to wherever you're going, walking across a room to answer the phone. Each step is an opportunity to be here, to feel the foot touching the ground, to know you're walking, to be present to your own life as it's actually happening, instead of lost in the endless stream of thoughts about what might happen, or what already happened, or what should happen differently. When you walk and know you're walking, when you actually feel each step, you recover yourself. You're not losing yourself anymore, not disappearing into thought, not gone from your own life. You're here, walking, breathing, alive. This practice doesn't require you to change anything about your life. You still walk from the parking lot to the office. You still sit at your computer and do your work. You still have conversations and meetings and tasks that need to be done. The difference is that you're actually present for your life instead of missing it entirely while you're busy thinking about it. The way out is in. This phrase sounds like a paradox, but it's completely literal. When you want to escape from stress, from overwhelm, from the feeling that life is just too much, the instinct is to go somewhere else. To distract yourself, to disconnect, to numb out, to get away from whatever you're feeling. But escape doesn't work. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. The thoughts follow. The feelings follow. The stress doesn't disappear just because you've changed locations or found a new distraction. You can scroll through your phone for an hour, and when you finally look up, the feeling you were trying to avoid is still there. You can watch videos or read articles or check messages, and none of it actually helps because you're not addressing what's actually happening inside you. The way out is in. You go into your body, into your breath, into this moment, exactly as it is. You stop trying to escape, and instead, you arrive. You sit down. You breathe. You feel your body. And in that arrival, something unexpected happens. The thing you were trying to escape from, it's still there. But it's not as overwhelming as it seemed when you were running from it. When you finally stop and turn around and face what you've been avoiding, you discover it's not a monster. It's just a feeling. Maybe fear, maybe sadness, maybe loneliness, or anxiety, or anger. But when you stop running and actually sit with it, when you breathe with it and let it be there without fighting it, it changes. Not that it goes away immediately, not that it becomes pleasant, but it's not impossible anymore. You can be with it. The Buddha taught a very specific practice for this. When you sit down and come home to yourself, when you connect with your body and your breath, you discover what's been waiting there. Feelings. Ones you've been avoiding or running from or trying to fix or make go away. Maybe loneliness. Maybe fear. Maybe sadness or anxiety or anger or shame. These feelings are part of home too. They're not intruders. They're not evidence that something is wrong with you. They're not problems to be solved or emotions to be overcome. They're just parts of yourself that need care. The practice is to smile to your feeling. Not a fake smile. Not pretending everything is fine when it's not. But a smile of recognition, of acknowledgement, of saying, I see you, I know you're there. You say to your loneliness, "My dear loneliness, I know you are there. I'm home to take care of you. My dear loneliness." Not, "My terrible loneliness," or "This loneliness I shouldn't have," or "This feeling that proves something is wrong with me." My dear loneliness. Like you would speak to a child who's been alone too long, waiting for someone to come home. You make peace with your loneliness. You make peace with your fear. You make peace with whatever feeling is there. This is completely different from what most of us have been taught. We've been taught to fight difficult feelings, to overcome them, to think positively, to distract ourselves, or numb them, or push through them, or make them go away as quickly as possible. We've been taught that difficult feelings are signs of weakness or problems to fix or evidence that we're not doing life correctly. The Buddha taught the opposite. You embrace your feeling with tenderness, whether it is fear or anger or loneliness. You don't fight it. You don't try to make it disappear. You don't pretend it's not there. You embrace it. Think about what embrace means. To hold something close. To wrap your arms around it. To let it know it's not alone. When a child is scared, you don't tell them to stop being scared. You don't lecture them about how their fear is irrational or how they should think differently. You hold them. You let them know you're there. You say, "I see you're scared. It's okay. I'm here with you." This is what you do with your own feelings when you come home. There's a part of you that's like a child who's been alone too long. Not literally a child, but some part of yourself that feels young and scared and like no one is coming. No one cares. No one even remembers you're here. Maybe it's the part that feels afraid late at night when everything is quiet. Or the part that feels lonely, even when surrounded by people. Or the part that carries old pain from years ago that never quite healed. The practice is to recognize this part, to see it clearly, to acknowledge it's there, and then to embrace it. Not to fix it, or heal it, or make it grow up faster. Not to tell it to stop feeling what it feels. Just to be there with it. To say, "I know you've been waiting. I know you've been alone. I'm sorry I left you here so long. I'm home now." This is what it means to take care of home. Not cleaning everything up immediately. Not making everything perfect. Not fixing every broken thing all at once. Just being there. Being present. letting the scared parts of yourself know they're not alone anymore. You do this with your breath. You breathe in, and you're aware you're breathing in. You breathe out, and you're aware you're breathing out. And while you're breathing, you let yourself feel whatever is there. The loneliness, the fear, the sadness. You don't try to breathe it away or make it disappear. You just breathe with it. Like sitting with a child who's upset. You don't need to fix anything or say the perfect thing. You just need to be there, breathing, present. And slowly, gradually, something shifts. Not all at once, not dramatically, but the feeling changes when you stop running from it. When you turn around and face it and say, I see you, I'm here with you. It's not a monster anymore. It's just a part of yourself that was scared you'd left forever. The Buddha said, be a home for yourself. Not for someone else. Not after you're perfect. Not someday when you finally have it all together. Now, with this breath, with this feeling, whatever it is, be an island unto yourself. This doesn't mean isolation. It doesn't mean you never need anyone else, or that relationships don't matter. It means you learn to be present to yourself first. Because you can't give what you don't have. If you don't know how to come home to yourself, how to sit with your own loneliness, how to embrace your own fear, how can you be truly present with someone else? You can't. You'll be two people both looking for home in each other, both empty-handed, both hoping the other person has what they need. But when you know how to come home to yourself, when you can sit down and breathe and be with your own feelings without running away, then you have something real to offer. Not neediness disguised as connection. Not two emptinesses trying to fill each other, but actual presence, actual home. You can be with someone else because you're no longer desperately searching for them to save you from yourself. You can listen to their pain without trying to fix it immediately, because you've learned to sit with your own pain. This Christmas season, when everything is about going home, the invitation is to discover the home you carry everywhere. Not the house you're visiting, not where your family gathers, but the home that's always been here, waiting for you to return. Your body, your breath, this moment, every step you take can bring you back. Every breath reminds you you're alive. Every time you stop and feel your feet on the ground, you're practicing coming home. You don't need to wait for the perfect conditions. You don't need to be fixed or healed or enlightened first. You can come home right now. Sit down. Breathe. Feel your body. Notice what's there, whatever feelings are waiting, whatever thoughts are circling. And instead of running, stay. Say to whatever you find there, I see you. I know you're here. I'm home to take care of you. This is the practice. Not once, not just today, but again and again, breath by breath, step by step, moment by moment. Coming home, being home, taking care of home. Christmas gatherings have a particular feeling to them. Everyone arrives carrying something, not just the dishes they brought or the wrapped presents, but something heavier. Everyone is looking for warmth, for safety, for some kind of comfort that will make the loneliness less sharp. Family members sit around tables, and beneath the conversation about weather and work and what's new this year, there's a quieter current running through the room. Each person hoping someone else has what they need. Each person hoping this gathering will finally fill the emptiness that's been there all year. It doesn't work. Not because people don't care about each other, or because families are broken, or because something is wrong with wanting connection. It doesn't work because everyone is looking for home in each other, and nobody brought home with them. The Buddha taught something very specific about this. Before you can go to him, to her, to help, you have to help yourself. You have to connect with yourself. And then when you have been able to connect with yourself, then the next step is possible, will be successful to connect with the other person. Without the first step, the second step is not possible. This isn't selfishness. This isn't about ignoring other people's needs or focusing only on yourself while everyone else suffers. This is about understanding a simple truth. You can't give what you don't have. If you haven't found home in yourself, if you don't know how to sit with your own loneliness or breathe with your own fear, you can't offer that to anyone else. You can only offer your own emptiness and hope theirs will somehow fill yours. Think about what happens when two people who haven't found home in themselves try to find it in each other. She is lonely, and he is lonely also. And he is looking for home, for some warmth, some safety. She's looking for the same thing. They come together, hoping the other person will provide what's missing, will somehow make the loneliness disappear, will be the answer to the emptiness that's been there as long as they can remember. For a little while, it might seem to work. The newness of connection, the excitement of someone paying attention, the temporary relief of not being alone, all of this can feel like home. But it's not home. It's two people leaning on each other, and neither one has ground beneath their feet. Eventually, the weight becomes too much. The loneliness comes back. The emptiness returns. And now there's resentment too, because each person feels betrayed, that the other person didn't save them like they were supposed to. This is why relationships fail without inner home. Not because people don't love each other enough, or because they chose the wrong person, or because something is fundamentally broken in them, but because they're asking another human being to do something only they can do for themselves, to be their home, their ground, their escape from their own inner experience. Watch this happen at any Christmas gathering. Someone arrives upset, and immediately others try to cheer them up. Someone is anxious, and others offer reassurance that doesn't actually reassure. Someone is lonely, and others fill the air with words and activity, trying desperately to make the loneliness go away. All of this coming from good intentions, from genuine care and love. But none of it works because everyone is trying to give what they don't have, trying to offer stability when they're unstable, trying to provide comfort when they're uncomfortable, trying to be home for someone else when they haven't found home in themselves. The Buddha's teaching is that once you have got a home, you can go to your partner. Once you know how to sit down and breathe, once you know how to be with your own feelings without running away, once you've learned to say, "My dear loneliness, I'm home to take care of you," then you can go to someone else. Not as someone desperately seeking rescue, but as someone who has something real to offer. You are confident because you know how to connect with yourself, how to have a home for yourself. So that confidence in you will inspire him or her to do the same. She can find a home in you, and then she will lean on that in order to build a home in herself. Not that you become her home, but that your presence, your actual, grounded presence, shows her it's possible. Shows her what it looks like when someone isn't running from themselves. Shows her there's another way. This confidence isn't arrogance or superiority. It's not thinking you're better than others, or that you've figured everything out. It's simply the quiet stability that comes from knowing how to come home to yourself. From having practiced sitting down and breathing enough times that you trust you can be with whatever arises. From having turned toward your own loneliness and fear enough times that you're no longer terrified of them. From having found ground beneath your feet that doesn't shift when circumstances change. When you have this kind of confidence, this kind of inner home, people feel it. They might not be able to name what's different about you. They might not understand why they feel calmer in your presence. But they sense something that you're not frantically seeking, not desperately trying to make them be a certain way, not using the interaction to escape from yourself. You're just there, breathing, present, with room inside yourself to actually be with them. This is the gift you can actually give this Christmas season. Not the perfect present or the right words or the ability to fix someone else's pain, but your own presence, your own groundedness. The home you've found in yourself that allows you to sit with someone else without needing them to be different, without needing them to make you feel better, without needing anything from them except to be exactly who they are in this moment. When you walk into a Christmas gathering and you've done the practice of coming home to yourself, even if just for 10 minutes before you arrived, even if just sitting in your car breathing before going inside, you bring something different into the room. You're not desperately scanning for someone to save you from your own discomfort. You're not performing or pretending or trying to be someone you're not. You're just there, breathing, present, at home in yourself, even when surrounded by people who might not be at home in themselves. And people feel this. They might not be able to name it or explain it, but they feel the difference between someone who's frantically seeking and someone who's simply present. Your calmness doesn't come from having no problems or being enlightened or having life figured out. It comes from knowing how to come home to yourself, how to breathe with whatever's there, how to be with your own experience without needing to escape it. The Buddha taught that you don't really need a phone or a device or anything technological to create real connection. You need your eyes to look at someone with compassion. You need your presence. You need your willingness to be there without judgment, without trying to fix them, without needing them to be different than they are. Think about what happens in most interactions now. Someone shares something difficult, and immediately the other person reaches for their phone to show them something distracting, or offers advice to fix the problem, or changes the subject to something more comfortable. Not because they don't care, but because they can't be with discomfort, not their own, and therefore not anyone else's either. True connection isn't about staying in touch through messages or keeping up with someone's posts or knowing what they're doing every day. True connection is what happens when two people are both present at the same time. When you have been able to connect with yourself, and then you sit with someone else who's struggling, whatever you say, whatever you think will help her, will help him to recover herself, to recover himself. Not because you have the perfect advice, or because you know how to solve their problems, but because you're not running from your own experience, so you don't need them to stop having theirs. You can sit with someone's pain without immediately trying to make it go away. You can listen to someone's fear without rushing in with solutions. You can be with someone's loneliness without trying to distract them from it. This is what most people have never experienced. Someone who can simply be there with them, not trying to change them or fix them or make them feel better, faster. Someone who can look at them with compassion, which doesn't mean pity or feeling sorry for them, but seeing them clearly and staying present anyway. Compassion isn't an emotion you work yourself into feeling. It's what naturally arises when you're present with someone and not running from your own experience. When you've sat with your own pain enough times that someone else's pain doesn't terrify you. When you've been with your own loneliness enough that someone else's loneliness doesn't feel like a threat or a burden. When you've found home in yourself, you have room to let someone else be exactly where they are, without needing to rush them through it. The teaching is very practical about how this works. There's a home here, and there's a home here, and there's a collective home here. When you've found home in yourself, and someone else has found home in themselves, then when you come together, there's a shared home. Not that you become each other's home or that you're responsible for maintaining their inner stability, but that two people who know how to be present with themselves can create something between them that's real and stable and safe. This collective home is different from codependence or neediness, or two emptinesses trying to fill each other. It's what becomes possible when both people have done the work of coming home to themselves first. They can be together without losing themselves. They can care about each other without needing the other person to be different. They can offer support without carrying the weight of someone else's entire emotional experience. Imagine two people sitting together, both breathing, both present to their own experience, both at home, in themselves. The silence between them isn't awkward or uncomfortable because neither person needs to fill it. They can simply be together. When one person speaks, the other can actually listen because they're not busy preparing their response or thinking about themselves or trying to fix what's being said. This is the collective home, the space that opens up between two people who've both found ground in themselves. And here's what's extraordinary about this teaching. Even in different towns, even separated by distance, true connection is possible. When you've found home in yourself, when you know how to be present to your own experience, you can connect with someone else even when you're not physically together. Not through constant texting or video calls or maintaining an illusion of closeness, but through actual presence, through being so grounded in yourself that when you think of someone, when you speak to someone, even across distance, something real passes between you. This Christmas season is filled with people trying to connect across distance. Family members who live in different cities, friends who haven't seen each other in months or years, relationships strained by geography or circumstance. And most of that connection attempt happens through devices, through messages and calls and video chats that try to bridge the gap, but somehow leave everyone feeling more disconnected than before. The reason these technological connections often feel empty isn't because technology is bad or because video calls can't work. It's because people are trying to use technology to create something they don't have in themselves. They're trying to use devices to fill the emptiness, to escape the loneliness, to avoid being present to their own experience. And when you're not present to yourself, you can't be present to anyone else, no matter how many messages you send or how often you video call. The Buddha's teaching points to something different. You don't need technology to maintain connection. You need to know how to be present with yourself. Because when you're grounded in your own experience, when you've found home in yourself, you carry that groundedness everywhere. It's not dependent on proximity or constant communication or keeping up appearances. It's something real in you that remains stable, whether you're sitting next to someone or thousands of miles away. When you call someone from this place, from having found home in yourself, from being present to your own breath and body before picking up the phone, the call is different. Your voice carries something different. The silence isn't uncomfortable. You're not frantically filling space or performing connection. You're actually there. And because you're actually there with yourself, you can be actually there with them too, even through a screen or across a phone line. Christmas is a time when we have to practice going home. This isn't about religion or celebrating a particular holiday or following any specific tradition. This is about understanding that the season itself, with its emphasis on returning, gathering, coming back to something, points to a practice we need year-round, but especially now. The practice of going home to yourself. We are losing ourselves. We are lost. We have to find ourselves again. This isn't dramatic language or poetic exaggeration. Look at your own experience honestly. How much of your day do you spend actually present to your life versus lost in thought about the past or future? How often do you walk without knowing you're walking, eat without tasting your food, have conversations without really listening because your mind is somewhere else entirely? Most people spend most of their lives lost. Not lost as in not knowing where they are physically, but lost as in not present to their own existence. The body walks through the world, performs tasks, goes through motions, but the person themselves, the awareness that could be present to all of this, is somewhere else. Thinking about yesterday or tomorrow, worrying about what might happen, or regretting what already did. Anywhere except here, now, alive. The Buddha taught that this is the way to heal ourselves and our society. Not through better technology or more efficient systems or new political solutions, though none of those things are inherently bad. But through each person doing the simple, difficult work of coming home to themselves, of sitting down and breathing, of walking and knowing they're walking, of being present to their own life instead of constantly escaping from it. Everything begins with yourself. This is the way prescribed by the Buddha. Not because other people don't matter, or because society's problems aren't real, but because you can't help anyone else if you haven't helped yourself first. You can't offer stability to others if you have none yourself. You can't guide someone home if you don't know the way there yourself. Think about this in terms of the Christmas gatherings you'll attend or host. If you walk in disconnected from yourself, if you haven't taken even 5 minutes to sit down and breathe and come home to your own body, then you arrive as someone seeking. Seeking validation, seeking comfort, seeking distraction from your own discomfort. And everyone else is doing the same thing. A room full of people, all seeking something from each other that none of them can actually provide. But if you take time before arriving to practice coming home to yourself, to sit down, to breathe, to feel your feet on the ground, to say hello to whatever feelings are there, then you arrive different. You're not seeking. You're not performing. You're not desperately trying to make the gathering be something it's not. You're just there, present, breathing, with a home inside yourself that nobody can take away and that doesn't depend on how the gathering goes. This changes everything about the gathering. When one person in a room is actually present, actually grounded, actually at home in themselves, it affects everyone. Not in some mystical or magical way, but in the simple fact that presence is contagious. When you're with someone who's genuinely calm, who's not running from themselves, who can sit with discomfort without needing to immediately fix it or escape it, something in you relaxes too. You might notice this with certain people in your life. There are people whose presence makes you feel more scattered, more anxious, more like you need to be someone you're not. And there are people whose presence somehow makes it easier to breathe, easier to be yourself, easier to settle. The difference isn't about personality or charisma. It's about whether that person has found home in themselves or is still desperately seeking it in others. Now we come to one of the Buddha's most profound teachings about refreshing your view. He used the example of a cloud. When you look at the cloud, you see that a cloud cannot die, cannot disappear altogether. A cloud can only become snow or rain. A cloud cannot really die, and a cloud is not born from nothing. The cloud is a continuation of water vapor, of ocean water meeting sun, of processes that were happening long before this particular cloud formed. Most people look at a cloud and think, there it is, now it's gone. They see birth and death. They see something that exists for a while and then ceases to exist. But this is wrong view. This is seeing with ignorance rather than wisdom. The cloud never actually comes into being from nothing, and it never actually disappears into nothing. It changes form. Water vapor becomes visible. Cloud becomes rain, becomes ocean, becomes vapor again. Nothing is born, nothing dies. Only transformation. The Buddha taught that we are like this too. We have the nature of no birth and no death. Not because we live forever in the same form, but because we were never born from nothing, and we will never die into nothing. Everything that makes up what we call me existed before in different forms and will exist after in different forms. The body is made of elements from the earth, from food, from air and water. The mind is made of thoughts and perceptions learned from others, experiences accumulated over time. Nothing is truly separate or independently existing. When you really see this, not just intellectually understand it, but actually see it, you are free of birth and death. Not that your body becomes immortal, or that you no longer experience physical death, but that you see through the illusion that you were ever born or could ever die. You see that what you call you is a temporary coming together of elements that existed before and will continue after in different forms. This teaching might sound abstract or philosophical, sitting around a Christmas table, but it has immediate practical application. Most of our fear comes from believing we can lose what we are. We're afraid of death because we think we'll disappear. We're afraid of change because we think we'll lose ourselves. We cling desperately to experiences and relationships and circumstances because we believe our existence depends on them remaining the same. Watch how this fear operates during Christmas. Someone takes a photo because they're afraid the moment will be lost. Someone holds on too tightly to traditions because they're afraid change means death. Someone tries to make everything perfect because they believe this gathering needs to be preserved exactly as it is, or something essential will disappear forever. All of this coming from the deep fear that things born can die, that what exists can cease to exist, that we can lose what we are. But when you see like the Buddha taught, when you refresh your view to see things as they actually are, rather than how ignorance makes them appear, this fear dissolves. Not because you've convinced yourself of something, or because you're pretending death isn't real, but because you've seen through the illusion that there's something permanent to lose in the first place. The cloud is free of birth and death right now. It doesn't have to wait until it reaches some enlightened state. It's already free because it never was born and it never will die. It only transforms. And we are also like this. We have the nature of no birth and no death. Not someday, not in some future realm after we die, but right now. This body, this mind, this life, already free of birth and death when you see it clearly. This is how refreshing your view creates instant freedom. You don't have to change anything about your circumstances. You don't have to wait for your life to be different, or for your problems to be solved, or for you to become a better person. You just have to see clearly what's already true. And what's true is that nothing is born, nothing dies. Everything is transformation. Everything is continuation. Nothing is ever truly lost, because nothing was ever truly separate in the first place. When you sit at a Christmas dinner table and you see, with this kind of clarity, everything changes. You're not desperately trying to hold on to moments or make experiences last longer or capture the perfect memory. You're present to what's actually happening, knowing it's part of a vast unfolding that existed before you got here and will continue after you leave. You can enjoy the gathering without clinging to it. You can love people without needing them to stay the same forever. You can be fully present because you're not trying to grasp something that's inherently ungraspable. The grandfather telling stories at the table, you see him not as someone who will die and disappear, but as water in a particular form, already part of transformation. The child laughing, you see her not as needing to be preserved in this moment forever, but as continuation happening, cloud becoming rain. The meal itself, you see it not as something to desperately hold on to, but as earth becoming food, becoming body, becoming earth again, nothing lost, everything transforming. This is what it means to be free. Not free from life, or free from relationships, or free from responsibility, but free from the suffering that comes from misunderstanding what life actually is. Free from the fear that comes from thinking you're a separate, permanent self that could be destroyed. Free from the desperate clinging that comes from thinking you can lose what you are. The Buddha taught this as a gift you can give, not just to others, but to yourself. The gift of seeing clearly. The gift of understanding that you have the nature of no birth and no death. The gift of knowing that the cloud cannot die, and neither can you. Not because your body won't change or because physical death won't happen, but because what you really are was never born and can never be destroyed. When you come home to yourself this way, when you sit down and breathe and see with clear eyes that you are like the cloud, transformation happening, continuation unfolding, never truly born and never truly dying, then you have something real to offer the people around you. You have freedom to give. Not freedom as an idea or concept, but freedom as an actual lived reality. The freedom to be present without fear. The freedom to love without clinging. The freedom to live without constantly running from death. This Christmas season, the invitation is to practice this refreshing of view. To look at your life, your relationships, your very existence the way the Buddha taught, not as something fragile and temporary that you have to desperately protect, but as something that's part of a vast, ongoing transformation that can't ultimately be lost because it was never ultimately separate. Look at your own hand right now. The cells that make it up are constantly dying and being replaced. The atoms that compose it came from the earth, from food, from air. The bones grew from nutrients passed through your mother's body before you were born. The skin is shedding and renewing every moment. What you call my hand is already transformation happening. Already continuation. Already demonstrating the teaching of no birth and no death. When you see this clearly, really see it, not just think about it, you're free. Free to be present with people without needing them to complete you. Free to love without the desperate edge of knowing it will end. Free to live fully because you're not constantly trying to protect yourself from something that was never really a threat in the first place. This is the collective home that becomes possible when people practice this way. Not a home built on illusions or neediness, or two people clinging to each other against the terror of existence. But a home built on clear seeing. A home where both people understand they are like clouds, temporary forms that water takes, never really born, never really dying, always part of something larger that continues. From this home, you can actually help others. Not by trying to save them or fix them or make their pain go away, but by being so grounded in your own seeing, so clear in your own understanding, so present in your own freedom that it shows them what's possible. Your presence becomes an invitation. Your freedom becomes a doorway. Your clarity becomes a light that helps them find their own way home. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught that everything begins with yourself. Not because you're the most important person, or because other people don't matter, but because clarity spreads from clarity, presence calls forth presence, and freedom invites freedom. When you've found home in yourself through seeing clearly, through refreshing your view to see things as they actually are, rather than how fear and ignorance make them appear, then you naturally help others find their way home too. The gift you can actually give this Christmas is your own presence, your own groundedness, your own freedom from the illusion of birth and death. Not as something you force on others or teach didactically, but as something you embody so fully that it becomes obvious. Like the cloud that's already free, because it never believed it was born and never feared it would die. Like the rain that knows it's just water, taking a different form. like the snow that understands it's part of something that continues. This is how you help others find home. By finding it yourself first. By doing the practice of sitting down, breathing, seeing clearly. By refreshing your view until you see what's always been true, that you were never born, you will never die, you are transformation happening, continuation unfolding, part of everything, and separate from nothing. And from that seeing, from that home, from that freedom, you can finally offer something real to the people around you who are still searching. There's a word the Buddha used that most people have never heard. Formation. It's a technical term, a Buddhist term, to designate everything. Like a flower, a marker, a book, a person, a tree. Everything is a formation. The Buddha didn't say things. He didn't say objects or entities or stuff. He said formations. And this one word, this choice to call everything formations instead of things, reveals something profound about how reality actually works. A formation is something that has been formed, something that's come together, something composite, made of parts, an agglomeration of many elements, gathering in one place for a while. Nothing exists on its own. Everything has to lean on other things in order to be formed. Look at the table in front of you, or the chair you're sitting in, or any solid object nearby. It seems permanent, separate, independently existing, just sitting there being itself, needing nothing else to be what it is. But this is wrong seeing. This is what happens when you look at reality without insight. The table isn't separate. It's a formation, made of wood that came from a tree that grew in soil that was enriched by decomposing matter that was once other plants and animals. The tree needed rain that came from clouds that formed over an ocean. It needed sun that's been burning for billions of years. It needed the logger who cut it down, the truck that transported it, the carpenter who shaped it, the person who bought it and brought it into this room. The table leans on all of this to exist. Remove any one of these elements, and there's no table. No sun means no tree. No tree means no wood. No carpenter means no table. The table isn't a separate, independent thing. It's a temporary gathering of countless elements that have come together and will eventually separate again. This is true of everything. The flower in the vase is a formation of soil, water, sun, seed, gardener, vase, the person who placed it there. The book on the shelf is a formation of trees, ideas, writer, printer, ink, distributor, reader. Your body is a formation of food you've eaten, air you've breathed, water you've drunk, DNA from parents, bacteria in your gut, experiences that shaped your nervous system. Nothing stands alone. Everything is leaning on everything else. The reason the Buddha chose the word formation instead of thing is subtle but crucial. When you call something a thing, you imply it has independent existence, that it just is what it is, separate from everything else, solid, permanent, with its own inherent nature. But when you call something a formation, you immediately acknowledge that it's composed of other elements, that it depends on conditions, that it's temporary, that it will eventually dissolve back into its components. Language shapes how we see reality. The words we use create the concepts we think with. When we habitually call everything things, my thing, your thing, that thing over there, we reinforce the illusion of separation and independence. We train ourselves to see the world as made up of discrete, separate objects, rather than as a vast web of interconnected processes. The Buddha taught that there are two ways of seeing formations. Most people see with the first way, which he called ordinary view or wrong view. Those who do not have insight, regular people, ordinary people, people who haven't practiced seeing clearly, they see formations as having their own nature, as solid, as permanent, as self, as essences. They look at the table and see table. They look at themselves and see self. They look at others and see separate people. They see things as having their own independent existence, as being able to exist without anything else, as having some core essence that makes them what they are. This is how most of us see most of the time. We see things as separate, as permanent, as independently existing. We walk through a room and see separate objects: chair, table, lamp, book, cup, each one appearing to exist independently, each one seeming solid and permanent. We interact with people and see separate individuals: him, her, them, me, each person appearing to be an independent entity, separate from all other entities, with their own inherent nature that makes them who they are. We look at our own experience and see a solid, permanent self, I, me, mine, that persists through time, that has its own independent existence, that stands apart from everything else, as the subject experiencing all objects. But all of this is illusion, not hallucination, not that nothing exists, but illusion in the sense that we're seeing incorrectly. We're seeing formations and mistaking them for things. We're seeing processes and mistaking them for entities. We're seeing temporary gatherings of conditions and mistaking them for permanent, independent, separate selves. This wrong seeing creates all of our suffering. When you see yourself as separate, you feel fundamentally alone. When you see yourself as permanent, you desperately fear change. When you see yourself as independently existing, you have to constantly defend and protect that existence because it feels threatened by everything else. Think about how much energy you spend trying to protect your sense of self, making sure others see you correctly, defending yourself when criticized, proving your worth, your competence, your lovability, trying to control how you're perceived, worrying about what others think. All of this exhausting work comes from the illusion that there's a separate, solid self that needs protecting. The Buddha offered a different way of seeing. He called it right view. With right view, we see formations as co-arising entities. We see that everything leans on other things in order to manifest. We see interbeing, mutual, arising, nothing existing independently of anything else. This isn't just philosophy or abstract thinking. This is training yourself to see what's actually there, instead of what your conditioned mind projects onto reality. And you can practice this seeing with anything, anywhere, anytime. Think about a Christmas tree standing in your home right now, or one you've seen recently. Most people look at it and see a tree, a separate thing brought in from outside, standing there being itself. But when you look with right view, you see something completely different. You see rain that fell on forests, maybe hundreds of miles from here, soaking into soil. You see sun that shone through branches, driving photosynthesis, creating the sugars that built this trunk, these needles. You see soil enriched over decades by decomposing leaves, dead insects, fungi breaking down organic matter into nutrients the tree could absorb. You see the seed that started this tree, perhaps 20 or 30 years ago, and the parent tree that produced that seed, and the generations of trees before that, all the way back through evolutionary time to the first plants that colonized land. You see the forest ecosystem where this tree grew, surrounded by other trees, its roots intertwined with theirs, connected through underground fungal networks that scientists have only recently discovered, sharing nutrients, communicating chemically when pests attack, functioning more like a single organism than separate individuals. You see the logger who cut this tree down, and that person's entire life, their parents who raised them, the food they ate that gave them strength to swing an axe or operate a saw, the teachers who taught them their trade, the economic forces that led them to this work. You see the truck that transported this tree to market, and the factory that built that truck, and the miners who extracted iron ore to make steel for the truck, and the ancient supernovas that created that iron through stellar fusion billions of years ago. You see the market where this tree was sold, and all the people who made that market possible, the organizers, the workers, the customers whose purchases keep the market running. You see the money exchanged and the complex economic system that makes money meaningful, and the governments that print currency, and the social agreements that give that currency value. You see your own hands that carried this tree into your home, placed it in water or a stand, positioned it in this spot. You see the food you ate that gave you energy to do this work. You see your parents who raised you, teaching you that Christmas trees are something people bring into their homes. You see every Christmas of your childhood, every image of Christmas you've ever absorbed, creating the context in which having a Christmas tree makes sense. You see the light that bounces off this tree into your eyes, and the evolution of eyes over millions of years, and the neural processing that interprets those light waves as tree, and the learning that taught you what trees are, and the language that gave you the word tree. The tree isn't a separate, independent thing. It's a formation, a temporary coming together of rain and sun and soil and seed and forest and logger and truck and metal and ancient stars and hands and food and parents and culture and light and eyes and neurons and language and everything else. This isn't poetic exaggeration. This is what the tree actually is when you see clearly. Every single one of those elements is necessary for this tree to be standing here now. Remove any one of them, and there's no tree in your home. When you see this, really see it, not just think about it, your relationship to the tree changes. You can't see it as just an object anymore, as a thing you bought and brought in to decorate with. You see it as a manifestation of the entire universe, as a point where countless conditions have gathered temporarily, as a formation that contains everything. And what's true of the tree is true of everything else. The food on your Christmas table is a formation of sun and rain and soil and farmers and trucks and cooks and ancient evolutionary processes that created edible plants and everything else. The gifts you give are formations of resources extracted from Earth, workers who manufactured them, delivery systems that brought them, economic systems that made exchange possible, cultural meanings that make gift-giving significant. Your own body sitting at that table is a formation of all the food you've ever eaten, all the air you've ever breathed, all the water you've drunk, the DNA passed through generations, the bacteria in your gut, without which you couldn't digest anything, the experiences that shaped your nervous system, the relationships that formed your personality. Where does you begin and not you end? Where's the boundary between the food you ate yesterday and your body today. Between the air you just breathed in and the oxygen now in your bloodstream. Between the words your parents spoke and the voice in your head. Between the trees producing oxygen and your lungs receiving it. There are no clear boundaries because everything is formation. Everything is interbeing. Everything is mutual arising with everything else. The Buddha took this teaching even further with an example that stops most people cold. He said, "There is rain, but we don't need a rainer to make the rain." Think about this. When you see rain falling, ordinary view says there must be someone or something making it rain. There must be an actor performing the action. There must be a doer doing the deed. But this is wrong view. Rain happens because warm air rises from Earth's surface, carrying water vapor. The vapor rises into cooler layers of atmosphere, where it condenses around tiny particles of dust or salt. Billions of these droplets gather together, forming clouds. As more vapor condenses, droplets grow larger and heavier. Eventually, they're too heavy for air currents to hold up, and they fall. It's a process, a formation, countless conditions coming together in a particular way. There's no rainer standing somewhere making rain happen. No entity behind the action choosing to make it rain. There's just raining, a verb, not a noun. Raining happening when conditions come together this way. This understanding dissolves one of the deepest illusions we carry. The illusion of a separate doer behind every action. The illusion of a permanent self that exists independently, making choices, performing actions, receiving results. Ordinary view says, "I am doing this. I made this happen. I am the actor, and there are receivers of my action. I am the subject, and everything else is object. I exist independently, separately, permanently, with the power to act on the world around me." But right view sees differently. Actions happen. Walking happens, but there's no walker separate from walking. Breathing happens, but there's no breather separate from breath. Thinking happens, but there's no thinker separate from thoughts. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It means you exist differently than you thought. You exist as a formation, a temporary coming together of elements, a process unfolding, a verb rather than a noun. You exist as interbeing, as mutual arising with everything else, not as a separate, independent, permanent entity. The Buddha taught no self. Not that there's nobody here, but that what's here isn't what you think it is. What you call I is a formation of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, all of which are themselves formations, none of which exist independently, all of which are constantly changing. Where is the self in this? If everything that makes up you is a temporary gathering of elements that are themselves temporary gatherings of elements, if everything is constantly changing, if nothing exists independently, then where is the permanent, solid, separate self you think you are? It's not there. It never was there. What's there is a process happening. Formation forming. Life living. But no separate, independent entity doing the living. This understanding brings freedom. When you see that there's no separate self, there's no separate self to protect. No separate self that can be threatened. No separate self that can be lost. The desperate quality that colors so much of life, the need to defend yourself, to prove yourself, to make sure you exist, to protect your existence from everything else. All of this dissolves when you see there's no separate self to defend in the first place. This also transforms how we understand karma. Ordinary view says, I did this action and I will receive the result. There's a doer and a receiver, cause and effect, action and consequence, all revolving around a separate self that acts and receives. But right view sees karma without a karma maker. Actions happen, results follow, but there's no separate self performing the action or receiving the result. It's more like when conditions come together in this way, this result arises. When conditions come together differently, different results arise. It's all mutual arising, codependent origination, formations leaning on formations, with no independent actor anywhere in the chain. This might sound abstract, but it has immediate practical application in your life right now. When something difficult happens, when you're hurt or disappointed, or things don't go as planned, ordinary view says, someone did this to you. There's an actor who performed the action, and you're the receiver of that action. This creates blame, anger, victimhood, the story of separate selves acting on each other. But when you see with right view, you see formations interacting. This person's anger, which is itself a formation of their past experiences, current stress, misunderstandings, chemical processes in their brain, and countless other conditions, met your sensitivity, which is itself a formation of your history, expectations, current state, and countless other conditions, and hurt happened. Not because someone independent decided to hurt someone else independent, but because conditions came together and this result arose. This doesn't mean actions don't matter or that there's no responsibility. It means seeing clearly what's actually happening rather than living in the illusion of separate, independent selves acting on each other. It means understanding that changing conditions changes results, that you can train yourself to respond differently, that formations can be reshaped because they're processes, not fixed things. Now we come to one of the Buddha's most startling teachings. He said that with ignorance, with ordinary view, with wrong seeing, the question is, to be or not to be. Over here with ignorance, to be or not to be is the question. But over here with right view, with clear seeing, to be or not to be is no longer the question. Shakespeare thought he was asking the deepest question possible. To be or not to be. Existence or non-existence. Being or nothingness. This is the question that haunts human consciousness, that drives so much of our fear and clinging and desperation. But the Buddha said Shakespeare was trapped in wrong view. He was caught in the illusion that things either exist as separate, independent entities, or they don't exist at all. He saw two options, being or non-being. But both options are based on the same wrong view, that things could exist independently, as separate entities, as permanent essences. Right view transcends this entire framework. Right view is the view that transcends the notion of being and non-being. Things don't exist the way you think they exist. They don't exist as separate, independent, permanent entities. But they also don't not exist. They exist as formations, as temporary gatherings of conditions, as mutual arising, as interbeing. The Christmas tree in your home, does it exist or not exist? Ordinary view says, of course it exists. I can see it right there. But when you look deeper, where is the tree? Is it in the wood? But the wood is rain and sun and soil. Is it in the shape? But the shape was given by the logger's saw and your hands arranging it. Is it in your perception of it? But your perception depends on light and eyes and neural processing and past experience with trees. The tree doesn't exist as an independent thing. But it also doesn't not exist. You can touch it, smell it, see it. It exists as a formation, as into being, as a verb rather than a noun, as treeing happening, not as tree being. When you see this clearly, the question, to be or not to be, becomes meaningless. Things don't be. They form. They arise depending on conditions. They exist as mutual arising with everything else, not as independent entities. This understanding frees you from the terror that haunted Shakespeare. The terror of non-being. The terror that you might cease to exist, that death will erase you, that you could become nothing. When you see clearly that you never existed as a separate, independent, permanent entity in the first place, there's nothing to cease existing. You exist as formation, as a temporary gathering of conditions that came together and will eventually separate. The conditions that make up what you call you will separate and reform into other formations. Nothing is lost because nothing was ever separate to begin with. You're like the cloud that becomes rain. The cloud doesn't die when it becomes rain. It transforms. The water that was cloud becomes water that is rain, becomes water that is ocean, becomes water that is vapor, becomes water that is cloud again. Nothing is born, nothing dies. Only transformation. You don't have to wait until death to be free of the fear of death. You can see right now that what you think of as your life and your death are both illusions based on wrong view. You were never born. The conditions that make up you existed before in other forms. You will never die. Those conditions will exist after in other forms. Birth and death are concepts we apply to formations, but formations themselves are always transformation, always continuation, never beginning or ending in the way we imagine. This is the freedom that comes from refreshing your view, from seeing formations as they actually are, rather than how ignorance makes them appear. This Christmas, sitting with family, eating food, exchanging gifts, you can practice this seeing. Look at the food on your plate. Don't just see food. See the formation. See the sun that grew the plants or fed the animals. See the rain that watered fields. See the soil enriched by countless organisms over decades or centuries. See the farmers who planted and tended and harvested. See the workers who processed and packaged. See the trucks that transported. See the stores that sold. See the cook who prepared this meal. See how everything leans on everything else, how nothing exists independently, how it's all one vast, interconnected web of mutual arising. Look at the person sitting across from you. Don't just see a separate individual. See the formation. See their parents who raised them and the food that built their body cell by cell over years. See the experiences that shaped their mind, the teachers who taught them, the friends who influenced them, the books they read, the conversations they had. See the air they're breathing right now, becoming part of them with each breath. See the light reflecting off them into your eyes, making their presence visible to you. See how you and they are not two separate things, but two aspects of one interconnected reality, both formations, both temporary gatherings of conditions, both processes unfolding, both verbs rather than nouns. When you see this way, something profound happens in how you relate to everything. You can't harm another without harming yourself, because there is no separate self and separate other. There's only mutual arising, interbeing, formations, depending on formations. When you hurt someone, you're hurting the web you're part of, which means you're hurting yourself. Not because of some mystical karmic law, but because you and they are aspects of one interconnected reality. You can't grasp and hold anything because there's nothing solid to grasp. Everything is transformation happening. Everything is already in process of becoming something else. The moment you try to freeze and hold is already gone, already becoming the next moment. You can appreciate, you can be present, you can love, but you can't freeze moments or make formations permanent, because formations by their nature are temporary gatherings that will separate. You're not alone, not separate, not isolated in an indifferent universe. You're interbeing with everything. You're mutual arising with the whole cosmos. Every breath connects you to trees across the world, producing oxygen. Every bite of food connects you to sun and rain and soil, and countless workers. Every thought connects you to every teacher and parent, and experience that shaped your mind, and to the evolutionary history that created minds capable of thought. You're not a separate thing trying to exist in a world of other separate things. You're an aspect of the whole, temporarily manifesting in this form, part of the vast transformation that is reality. This is what the Buddha meant by formations and why he chose that word instead of things. Things implies permanence, separation, independent existence. Formations implies process, interbeing, mutual arising, temporary gathering, and eventual separation and regathering in new forms. This is what right view sees that ordinary view misses. Not that nothing exists, but that things exist differently than ignorance makes them appear. They exist as formations, as verbs happening, as processes unfolding, as temporary dances of conditions that came together and will separate and come together again in new configurations. This is the freedom beyond being and non-being. Not that you exist as a separate entity, And not that you don't exist at all, but that you exist as interbeing, as formation, as part of everything, never born because you were never separate, never dying, because transformation continues forever. When you refresh your view this way, when you see formations as formations rather than as things, when you see yourself and others and everything as mutual arising rather than as separate, independent entities, you're free. Free from the fear of non-being that haunted Shakespeare. Free from the desperation to prove you exist, to defend your existence, to make yourself solid and permanent. Free from the exhausting work of maintaining the illusion of a separate self. Free from the loneliness that comes from thinking you're isolated and alone. You're here, breathing, part of the vast web of interbeing, a formation among formations, a verb among verbs, transformation happening, never separate, never alone, never truly born, and never truly dying, already free if you can just see clearly. This is what you're actually looking at when you see with clear eyes. Not things, but formations. Not separate entities, but interbeing. Not being or non-being, but the freedom beyond both. The cloud is in the sky right now. You can see it, or you've seen clouds today, or you'll see them tomorrow. Watch what happens when a cloud becomes rain. Where does the cloud go? Most people would say, the cloud disappears. It was there. Now it's not. Therefore it died. It ceased to exist. But this is wrong view. This is seeing with ignorance rather than with clarity. The cloud doesn't disappear. The cloud doesn't die. The cloud becomes rain. The water that was visible as cloud becomes water that falls as rain. Same water, different form. Nothing is lost. Nothing ends. Nothing dies. Only transformation. And where did the cloud come from in the first place? It didn't appear from nothing. The cloud is a continuation of water vapor that rose from the ocean, heated by the sun, lifted into the atmosphere. That water was in the ocean before it was in the sky. Before that, it was rain that fell into the ocean. Before that, it was cloud. Before that, it was vapor rising from lakes and rivers and soil. On and on, back through time, the same water cycling through different forms. The cloud is not born from nothing. The cloud does not die into nothing. The cloud is transformation happening, continuation unfolding, water taking different shapes, but never beginning and never ending. When you see this clearly, you touch the nature of no birth, no death. This isn't mysticism or religious belief. This is observable reality. Science confirms exactly what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that there is nothing born, nothing died. You cannot create matter. You cannot destroy matter. You cannot create energy. You cannot destroy energy. Matter and energy can change form. Ice becomes water, becomes vapor. Chemical energy becomes kinetic. Energy becomes heat. But the total amount never increases or decreases. Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing becomes nothing. This is the nature of no birth, no death. Not as philosophy or poetry, but as physical law, confirmed by every scientific experiment ever conducted. Chemists know you can't create or destroy atoms in chemical reactions, only rearrange them. Physicists know you can't create or destroy energy, only transform it from one form to another. Biologists know that organisms don't appear from nothing and don't disappear into nothing. They're temporary arrangements of matter that was there before and continues after. And we are made of matter and energy. Every atom in your body right now existed before you were born. The calcium in your bones was forged in the core of dying stars billions of years ago. The iron in your blood was created when massive stars exploded as supernovas. The carbon that makes up most of your body cycled through countless other organisms before becoming you, through plants and animals and bacteria and fungi, through soil and air and water, on and on through millions of years. The oxygen you breathe right now was produced by trees and algae yesterday or last week. The water in your cells fell as rain, was drunk by you, absorbed into your bloodstream. The proteins building your muscles right now came from food you ate, that came from plants, or animals that came from soil and sun and rain. Nothing in you is new. Nothing in you was created from nothing. You are a temporary arrangement of elements that have been cycling through the universe for billions of years. The Buddha taught, we also have the nature of no birth and no death. You were never born from nothing. The elements that compose you existed before in other forms. In food your mother ate while pregnant, in plants that grew in soil, in animals that ate those plants, in rain that watered fields, in ancient seas, in primordial stellar fusion. You will never die into nothing. The elements that currently compose you will continue after, in other forms, returning to soil, nourishing plants, entering other organisms, evaporating into air, cycling endlessly through the great transformation that is reality. What you call birth is really continuation, taking a new form. What you call death is really continuation, taking another form. Nothing begins, nothing ends. Only transformation. This understanding isn't meant to be intellectual knowledge you file away. It's meant to free you from the deepest fear humans carry, the fear of ceasing to exist, of becoming nothing, of being erased from reality. When you see clearly that you have the nature of no birth and no death, this fear dissolves. Not because you believe in an afterlife or reincarnation or anything requiring faith, but because you see directly that the very premise of the fear is false. You can't cease to exist because you never existed as a separate, independent entity in the first place. You exist as a formation, as a temporary gathering of elements, as a process unfolding, as interbeing with everything. And formations don't die, they transform. This Christmas season brings a particular kind of celebration. Every December, people celebrate birth. The birth of Christ in Christian tradition, or simply the symbolism of new life, new beginnings, fresh starts that the season represents. Christmas morning, children waking early, running to see what's under the tree, tearing open wrapping paper to discover what's inside. The joy of new things. New toys, new clothes, new books, new gadgets. Everything shiny and fresh and just born into their possession. But what is actually new? What is actually born? Look at any gift more closely. That toy was manufactured in a factory from plastic, that came from oil, that formed over millions of years, from ancient organisms that died and were compressed under the earth. The doll or action figure is made of molecules that existed long before anyone designed this particular arrangement. The electronics contain metals extracted from mines, refined from ore, shaped into circuits, all matter that existed in different forms, now temporarily arranged as phone or tablet or game. The book is paper from trees, ink from pigments, ideas from the author's mind, but the trees grew from soil, enriched by decomposition. The author's ideas came from everything they read and experienced. The ink's molecules existed in other forms before. Nothing in the book is born from nothing. It's all continuation, all transformation, all matter and energy taking new shapes. Even the wrapping paper that gets torn off and thrown away, it doesn't die. It goes to a landfill or recycling center where it breaks down into cellulose fibers that become soil or new paper. The matter continues. The molecules persist. Nothing ends. The joy children feel opening presents is real. The newness they experience is genuine. But it's newness of arrangement, not newness of substance. It's new to them, new in this form, but not new in the sense of having been created from nothing. This isn't meant to diminish the joy. Understanding the truth doesn't make Christmas morning less beautiful. It makes it more beautiful because you see what's actually happening, not isolated objects appearing from nowhere, but the entire universe arranging itself in new patterns, the great dance of transformation, expressing itself as wrapped boxes under trees. Think about what birth actually means. When a baby is born, we say, a new person has come into existence. But has anything actually been created from nothing? The baby is made of cells that came from the mother's body, nourished by food she ate, built from nutrients that came from plants and animals that came from soil and sun. The DNA that codes for this baby's body came from parents, grandparents, ancestors, stretching back through evolutionary time. The consciousness that will develop in this baby's brain will be shaped by everything it experiences, every word it hears, every relationship it forms. Nothing is born from nothing. Birth is continuation taking a new form. Birth is the universe arranging itself differently, not something appearing from nowhere. Christmas as symbol of birth points to something true, but not in the way most people think. The birth celebrated isn't the beginning of something from nothing. It's the continuation of what always was, taking a new form, manifesting in a new way. In Christian tradition, Christmas celebrates divinity becoming flesh, the eternal entering time, the infinite taking finite form. This is actually very close to the Buddhist understanding when you see it clearly. Not that something separate called divinity decided to enter something separate called flesh, but that what always was, the nature of reality, the Buddha nature, the ground of being, manifests in this form, becomes visible in this way, expresses itself through this life. In this sense, Christmas is a symbol of awakening rather than literal birth. The light that comes into darkness isn't new light appearing from nowhere. It's the same light that always was, now visible, now recognized, now seen clearly. When you wake up to the nature of no birth and no death, when you see clearly that nothing begins from nothing and nothing ends in nothing, when you understand that everything is transformation and continuation, this is the real Christmas gift. Not wrapped boxes under trees, but freedom from the fear that haunts human existence. The Buddha taught very clearly about why people suffer. Because of ignorance, you see the world as formations, and formations appear as the phenomenal world. We see formations as separated entities. This is the root. This is where suffering begins. Not in circumstances or events or other people's actions, but in how we see. When you look at reality with ignorance, you see things as separate, independent, permanent. You see yourself as a separate self, others as separate others, objects as separate objects. You see birth as beginning and death as ending. You see gain as acquiring what you didn't have and loss as losing what you had. You see success and failure, victory and defeat, being something or being nothing. All of this is mental construction. You're living inside a world you've built in your mind, a world that doesn't match how reality actually works. And because your mental construction doesn't match reality, you suffer. It's like wearing glasses with the wrong prescription. Everything looks distorted, blurry, wrong. You bump into things because you can't see clearly where they are. You reach for objects that aren't where they appear to be. You walk through life confused and frustrated because what you see doesn't match what's there. Ignorance is the wrong prescription. It distorts reality, makes you see separation where there's interbeing, permanence where there's transformation, independent existence where there's mutual arising. And wearing these wrong glasses, you create your own suffering by trying to relate to a reality that doesn't exist the way you see it. You try to protect a separate self that isn't actually separate. You try to make permanent what is by nature impermanent. You try to control what is always changing, grasp what is always flowing, hold what is always transforming. And all of this creates suffering, not because reality is against you, but because you're working against reality. The Buddha said, "When you have seen that samsara disappears, you don't have to get out of samsara. There is no samsara at all." This is revolutionary. Most religious and spiritual traditions tell you that you're trapped in something: sin, suffering, illusion, the material world, the cycle of rebirth, and you need to escape. You need to work hard, pray right, practice correctly, purify yourself, transcend your humanness, die and go somewhere else. But the Buddha taught something completely different. He said samsara is a notion, not a reality. You're not trapped in suffering that you need to escape from. You're trapped in wrong seeing, and when you see correctly, there's nothing to escape from, because there was never anything trapping you except your own misunderstanding. This is a problem of knowledge. Salvation by knowledge, by insight. Not salvation by belief or faith or devotion or good deeds or ritual or prayer. Salvation by seeing clearly. by removing the wrong prescription and seeing reality as it actually is. Think about the suffering in your own life. How much of it comes from circumstances, and how much comes from how you see circumstances? Someone speaks sharply to you. The actual event, sound waves forming words, lasts a few seconds. But you can suffer for hours, days, weeks because of how you see it. You see it as personal attack on your separate self. You see the other person as separate entity who chose to hurt you. You see yourself as victim, them as aggressor, the situation as proof that you're not valued or respected or loved. All of that is mental construction. You've built an entire story from a few seconds of sound waves. And you suffer from the story you built, not from the sound waves themselves. Or you lose your job. The circumstance is that you no longer go to that office and receive that paycheck. But the suffering comes from seeing yourself as someone who has failed, who is now less valuable, who might not be able to survive, who has lost their identity and worth. All mental construction built on top of a simple circumstance. Or someone you love dies. The grief is real. The loss is real. The absence is painful. But how much of the suffering comes from seeing death as absolute ending? From believing that the person was a separate, independent entity that has now been erased from existence? From thinking they went from being to non-being, from existence to nothingness. When you see clearly that nothing is born and nothing dies, when you understand that the person you loved was a formation of elements that existed before and continue after, when you recognize that what you called them was never a separate, permanent entity, but a temporary manifestation of the whole, the grief doesn't disappear, but it transforms. You're not grieving someone who disappeared into nothing. You're grieving a form that changed, a pattern that rearranged, a wave that returned to ocean. And you can see that the elements that formed that person continue. The matter persists in other forms. The energy continues its transformations. The influence they had on you and others continues rippling outward. Nothing was actually lost because nothing was ever separate to begin with. This doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It means you're not suffering from illusion on top of pain. You're not adding the story of permanent loss to the reality of change. You're not creating additional suffering by believing in separation and permanence that never existed. The Buddha's teaching about no birth and no death isn't meant to comfort you with pleasant beliefs. It's meant to show you reality so clearly that fear dissolves, not because you believe something comforting, but because you see there was never anything to fear. Now we come to something the Buddha himself addressed directly, the traditional teaching about how suffering perpetuates itself. In Buddhist texts, you find the 12 links of dependent origination, often presented in a chain. Because of ignorance, there are formations. Because of formations, there is consciousness. Because of consciousness, there is name and form, and so on, through 12 links, ending with aging and death. This teaching is meant to show how suffering arises and continues, how samsara perpetuates itself. But the traditional linear presentation has many weaknesses. Serious weaknesses that Thich Nhat Hanh pointed out directly. First, presenting it as a linear chain gives the impression that ignorance is the first cause. That everything begins with ignorance, and if you could just eliminate that first cause, everything else would collapse. But according to Buddhist insight, there is no first cause. Think about this carefully. If there were a first cause, something that exists without being caused by anything else, then that first cause would itself need a cause. Why does it exist rather than not exist? What made it come into being? If you say it just exists without cause, you've violated the very principle you're using to explain everything else. This is why the notion of first cause is contradictory to itself. If everything needs a cause, then the first cause needs a cause. If not everything needs a cause, then why assume anything needs a cause? The whole concept falls apart under examination. The Buddha taught that every cause is at the same time an effect. The cloud causes rain, but the cloud is an effect of evaporation. Evaporation causes vapor to rise, but evaporation is an effect of sun's heat. Sun's heat causes evaporation, but sun's heat is an effect of nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion causes heat, but fusion is an effect of gravity compressing hydrogen. On and on. Every cause is also an effect. Every beginning is also a continuation. Nothing starts from nothing. So ignorance isn't the first cause of suffering. Ignorance is itself caused by not being taught to see clearly, by being surrounded by others who see wrongly, by habits built over years, by neurological patterns that developed through evolution, by cultural conditioning, by language structures that reinforce separation and independence. The 12 links don't work in a linear chain. They work in a web, each one strengthening all the others. Ignorance creates formations that we see wrongly, and seeing formations wrongly strengthens ignorance. Wrong seeing creates craving, And craving strengthens wrong seeing, because we become invested in what we crave and see reality through that filter. Craving creates grasping, and grasping strengthens craving, because the more we grasp, the more we feel we need. Every link reinforces every other link, not in a line, but in a self-perpetuating system where everything holds everything else in place. This is actually how suffering works in experience. You don't follow a neat path from ignorance to suffering. You're caught in a web where every wrong view strengthens every other wrong view, where every bit of clinging reinforces every other bit of clinging, where the whole system holds itself in place through countless interconnections. And here's the revolutionary insight. You don't need to escape from this system, because there is no system to escape from. The 12 links are a description of wrong seeing. They describe what happens when you see reality with ignorance. They describe the world as it appears through the wrong prescription. But they're not describing something real that you're trapped in. They're describing the illusion you're living inside. When you see clearly, the 12 links disappear. Not because you've broken the chain, or escaped from the wheel, or worked your way through the links one by one, but because you see there was never any chain, or wheel, or system to be trapped in. It's like waking from a nightmare. In the nightmare, you're being chased by monsters through an endless maze. The maze is real within the dream. The monsters are terrifying within the dream. The feeling of being trapped is absolute within the dream. You run and run, but can't escape because the maze has no exit, and the monsters are faster than you. But when you wake up, you don't escape from the maze, or defeat the monsters, or find the exit. You see that there was never any maze. The monsters were never real. You were never trapped because the entire thing was mental construction, a dream your mind created. This is what the Buddha meant when he said that when you have seen samsara disappear, you don't have to get out of samsara. There is no samsara at all. Samsara is the word for the wheel of birth and death and suffering that you believe you're trapped in. The endless cycle of being born, suffering, dying, being reborn, suffering again, on and on without escape. But it's not real. It's a notion. It's how reality appears when you see it with ignorance, like how a nightmare appears real while you're dreaming. When you see clearly, when you see formations as formations, interbeing as interbeing, no birth and no death, no separate self, everything mutual arising, samsara vanishes. Not because you've escaped, but because you see it was never there except as wrong seeing. You don't have to struggle to get out. You don't have to work through the 12 links one by one. You don't have to gradually eliminate ignorance, then formations, then consciousness. You just have to see clearly, and in seeing clearly, the whole illusion collapses instantly. This is why the Buddha emphasized right view above everything else. Not right behavior, not right meditation, not right concentration, though all of these matter and support each other. But right view first, because right view is seeing clearly, and seeing clearly dissolves the illusion that creates all suffering. This Christmas season, you have an opportunity to practice this seeing. When you light a candle, watch the flame. See that the flame isn't a thing but a process. Wax, vaporizing, mixing with oxygen, igniting, releasing heat and light. See that the flame doesn't exist separately from wax and wick and oxygen and heat. See that nothing is born when you light the candle. The energy in the wax existed before as chemical bonds in molecules formed from ancient sunlight stored in hydrocarbons. See that nothing dies when you blow the candle out. The energy continues as heat dispersing into air and light that already traveled outward at the speed of light. When you see family members, look clearly at how you're seeing them. Are you seeing them as separate, independent entities? Are you seeing them as permanent selves that should be a certain way? Are you seeing them as objects that either meet your expectations or disappoint you? Are you seeing them through the lens of past conflicts or future hopes rather than as they actually are in this moment? Or can you see them as formations, temporary gatherings of elements, processes unfolding, transformations happening, not separate from you but interbeing with you, not permanent but changing every moment, not independently existing but arising mutually with everything else, including you? When you see clearly that they are formations, that you are a formation, that everything is formation, the quality of your relationship transforms. You're not two separate selves, bumping against each other, trying to get what you need from each other, disappointed when the other doesn't behave as expected. You're two aspects of one interconnected reality, temporarily manifesting in these forms, already connected at the deepest level, already whole, already free, if you can just see clearly. This is the deep teaching the Buddha offered. Not rules to follow or practices to perfect, or states to achieve or beliefs to adopt, but clear seeing, seeing formations as formations, seeing no birth and no death, seeing no separate self, seeing into being, mutual arising, everything leaning on everything else, nothing existing independently, and seeing clearly that samsara, the wheel of suffering you think you're trapped in, the cycle of birth and death you fear, the system of cause and effect that seems to bind you, is a notion, a mental construction, an illusion created by wrong seeing. When you see clearly, samsara disappears, not because you escaped from it, but because you see it was never there, except as a way of seeing, a prescription through which reality appeared distorted. This Christmas, the gift you can give yourself is clear seeing. Not comfort or consolation or pleasant beliefs to make you feel better, but the freedom that comes from seeing reality as it actually is. You are like the cloud, never born from nothing, never dying into nothing. Always transformation, always continuation, always part of everything, never separate, never alone, never truly beginning, and never truly ending. This is not belief. This is not faith requiring you to accept what you can't see. This is observable reality confirmed by both ancient wisdom and modern science, verifiable in your own experience if you look clearly. The first law of thermodynamics and the Buddha's teaching say exactly the same thing. Nothing is born, nothing dies, only transformation. When you see this clearly, really see it, not just think about it or believe it intellectually, fear dissolves. Not because you've convinced yourself of something comforting, but because you see directly that there was never anything to fear. The whole premise of fear, that you could cease to exist, that you could be lost, that you could become nothing, is based on wrong seeing. You can't lose what you are because what you are was never separate to begin with. You can't die into nothing because you were never born from nothing. You can't be trapped in suffering because suffering is created by wrong seeing, and wrong seeing dissolves instantly in clear seeing. This is the freedom beyond birth and death. This is the peace beyond understanding. This is what Christmas really celebrates, not the birth of something from nothing, but the light of clear seeing, illuminating what always was, the awakening to reality as it is, the end of the nightmare of separation, and the beginning of seeing clearly. Many Western scholars who studied Buddhism came to a strange conclusion. They read the ancient texts, learned about nirvana, studied the Buddha's teachings, and decided that nirvana is eternal death. According to their understanding, a Buddhist practitioner might experience some peace while still alive, maybe 20 or 30 years of calm before they die. But the real goal, the final nirvana, comes only after death, when they die forever and never come back. No rebirth, no return, just absolute extinction. Nothing. Eternal death. This interpretation has caused tremendous confusion about what Buddhism actually teaches. It makes Buddhism sound like a religion that worships death, that sees existence as so terrible the only solution is to stop existing altogether. It makes nirvana sound like the ultimate escape, not just from suffering, but from life itself. It makes practitioners look like people who are so afraid of life that they're working toward their own extinction. But this is completely wrong. This is a fundamental misunderstanding that comes from reading texts without practicing, from studying concepts without experiencing reality, from trying to understand Buddhism through the lens of Western ideas about existence and non-existence. The Buddha never taught that the goal is to stop existing. He taught that the goal is to stop seeing wrongly. There's a big difference. When you stop seeing wrongly, you don't disappear. You see clearly what was always true. You don't escape from life. You finally experience life as it actually is, without the distortion of ignorance. You don't die into nothingness. You wake up to reality as it always was, is, and will be. Thich Nhat Hanh used a metaphor to explain why people can know the truth intellectually but still suffer. He said it's like someone who has found a well so deep they know there is water. They can see the water down there at the bottom of the well, far below where they stand. They know it's there. They even know that water could satisfy their thirst, could cool them, could sustain their life. But they don't have an instrument to get the water from down there, up here to drink. So they remain thirsty, even though they know there's water. They remain thirsty, even though they can see the water with their own eyes. They remain thirsty, even though they could describe the water to others, could point to it, could explain its properties. The knowledge doesn't help because they can't access what they know. This is the situation many people find themselves in with the Buddha's teaching about no birth and no death. Scientists know the first law of thermodynamics. Nothing is created, nothing is destroyed. Matter and energy only transform. They know this intellectually. They can explain it. They've verified it through countless experiments. They teach it to students as established fact. They've built entire fields of physics and chemistry on this foundation. But they still fear death. They still suffer from the terror of ceasing to exist. They still lie awake at night, anxious about their own mortality and the mortality of people they love. They still feel the sharp pain of loss when someone dies, still grieve as if that person has been erased from existence completely. Why? Because knowing something intellectually is different from living it. Because seeing water at the bottom of a well is different from drinking it. Because understanding a truth conceptually is different from experiencing that truth in your body, your breath, your moment-to-moment awareness. Because you can know something with your mind, while your whole being still operates as if the opposite is true. The Buddha's teaching is not about accumulating knowledge. It's about transforming how you experience reality. It's about bringing the water up from the well so you can actually drink it, not just know it's there. It's about making the truth real in your lived experience, not just real as an idea you can explain. This is why practice matters. This is why meditation, mindfulness, ethical living, and moment-to-moment awareness are essential, not optional. You can read every Buddhist text ever written, memorize every teaching, understand every concept, and still suffer if you don't practice bringing the teaching into lived experience. You'll be like the person staring at water in a deep well, knowing it's there, but unable to drink. Nirvana is not something that happens after you die. Nirvana is freedom that's available right now, in this moment, with this breath. The Buddha gave a very practical teaching about this, using the metaphor of thorns. When we step on a thorn, when we get the thorn inside our flesh, we suffer. The thorn causes pain. It's stuck in there, and every step hurts. Every movement reminds us it's there. The pain is constant, a sharp reminder with each movement that something is wrong, something needs attention. We think there will be no peace unless we take it out. And when we are able to take the thorn out, we feel wonderful. That relief, that release, that sudden absence of pain, that is freedom. That is nirvana. Every affliction is like a thorn stuck in your flesh. Anger is a thorn. It causes pain with every thought, every interaction, every memory that triggers it. Fear is a thorn. It causes suffering constantly, making you tense, anxious, unable to rest. Loneliness is a thorn. It aches constantly, a dull, persistent pain that colors everything. Despair is a thorn that makes every step heavy. Anxiety is a thorn that never lets you settle. Jealousy, resentment, hatred, greed, all thorns causing suffering, all removable. To remove afflictions like fear, anger, despair, loneliness is possible. Not through some far-off enlightenment that comes only after decades of meditation in monasteries. Not through death and eternal extinction. Not through becoming a completely different person who never experiences difficulty. But right now, this moment, by recognizing the thorn and gently, carefully removing it. When you're angry and you recognize the anger, stop, breathe with it, understand what conditions created it, see it clearly as a formation arising from causes and not as who you are, and it dissolves. That's one thorn removed. In that moment, you experience freedom. In that moment, you touch nirvana. Not forever, not permanently, but really. Real freedom, real relief, real peace. When you're afraid and you turn toward the fear, instead of running from it, sit with it without being controlled by it. See it clearly as a mental formation arising from conditions and not as reality itself, and it loosens its grip on you, transforms from terror into just sensation and thought. That's one thorn removed. That's nirvana. Available now. When you're lonely and you practice coming home to yourself, connecting with your breath and body, recognizing you're never actually separate from everything because you're interbeing with the whole cosmos, and the desperate quality of loneliness shifts into something else, something bearable, something that doesn't control you. That's one thorn removed. That's nirvana. Nirvana isn't one big thing that happens all at once after you've achieved perfect enlightenment and never suffer again. Nirvana is many small freedoms, each one real, each one available now, each one accessible through practice. It's the accumulation of thorns removed, moments of freedom experienced, times when you're not caught in suffering, even though suffering-producing conditions are present. If you feel free in life, that is nirvana. Not if you feel free after death. Not if you achieve permanent freedom that never wavers. Not if you become so enlightened you never experience difficulty. If you feel free now, even for a moment, even partially, even while other thorns remain, that is nirvana. This completely changes what practice means. You're not practicing to achieve some distant goal. You're practicing to experience freedom now. Every thorn you remove, every affliction you release, every moment you're not caught in fear or anger or despair, that's the goal realized. That's not preparation for nirvana later, that is nirvana. This is why the Buddha emphasized practical training in how to live. Not just philosophy or meditation techniques, but ethical guidelines for daily life that reflect understanding of reality and create the conditions for freedom. The 5 mindfulness trainings are a very concrete expression of the path. They're practical guidelines about how to relate to life, other beings, your body, communication, and consumption in ways that create freedom rather than suffering. They address reverence for life, true happiness, true love, loving speech, and deep listening, and nourishing awareness. But they're not rules imposed from outside by some authority. They're not commandments you follow because you're supposed to, or because you'll be punished if you don't. They're natural expressions of seeing clearly. When you truly see that everything is into being, that harming another harms yourself because there is no separate self and separate other, you naturally become more careful about causing harm. Not because a rule says so, but because you see directly that it makes no sense to hurt what you're part of. Like it makes no sense to deliberately stab your own foot, not because there's a rule against it, but because you see clearly that you'd be creating your own suffering. When you truly see that your body is a formation sustained by countless conditions, that it's a wonder of interbeing rather than a possession you own, you naturally treat it with more care and respect. Not following rules about what you should or shouldn't consume, but responding to reality as you see it clearly. When you truly see that your words create effects that ripple outward, affecting everyone and everything they touch, that speech is action with consequences. You naturally become more mindful about what you say and how you say it. Not censoring yourself out of fear, but speaking consciously because you see your words matter. They create reality. They can heal or harm. The Buddha taught, if we really try to live according to the 5 trainings, we can experience freedom and nirvana every moment. Every moment. Not after 20 years of practice. Not after you die. Not after you achieve some special state of consciousness. Every moment you live in alignment with reality as it is, you experience freedom. Every moment you're not creating thorns or getting stuck on thorns, you're touching nirvana. This Christmas season offers countless opportunities to experience this freedom if you're present to them. Christmas Eve, late at night, the house finally quiet. Everyone else has gone to bed. The dishes are done. The presents are wrapped. The preparations are complete. The tree lights glow softly in the darkened room. You sit there alone and you breathe. This moment, sitting, breathing, present, is an opportunity for freedom. Not freedom from Christmas or from family or from life or from your responsibilities, but freedom from the racing thoughts about whether everything will go well tomorrow. Freedom from the anxious checking and rechecking of lists in your mind. Freedom from the desperate need to make everything perfect, to control every detail, to ensure everyone is happy. You breathe and know you're breathing. You sit and know you're sitting. You're here, now, alive, not caught in past or future, not suffering from the thorns of worry and control. That's one thorn removed. That's freedom. That's nirvana available right now in this quiet moment before Christmas morning. Christmas morning, you step outside before anyone else wakes. The air is cold against your face, sharp and clean. Your breath forms clouds that you can see, water vapor becoming visible in cold air, then dispersing into the atmosphere. Your feet touch the ground with each step, and you're aware of walking, aware of breathing, aware of the cold, aware of the quiet before the day begins, and the house fills with voices and activity. With every step you make in mindfulness, you get free, and that freedom is nirvana. Free from what? Free from the past, from old resentments about family dynamics, from memories of disappointing Christmases when expectations weren't met, from the weight of everything that happened before this moment, from grudges held and slights remembered. Free from the future, from anxiety about how the day will unfold, from expectations that create pressure and tension, from fear that things won't meet some imagined standard you've set, from worrying about what could go wrong. Free from your worries about money spent on gifts, about relationships that feel strained, about whether you're doing this whole thing right, about whether you're enough, whether you've done enough, whether it will be enough. This is nirvana, not some mystical state far removed from ordinary life where you float in bliss forever. But this, walking in cold air, breathing, present, not caught in past or future, not suffering from the thorns of regret and anxiety and self-doubt. The practice the Buddha taught isn't about achieving something extraordinary that only special people can experience. It's about being fully present to what's ordinary, what's already here, what's always available. It's about removing the thorns of affliction one by one, so you can experience life as it actually is, without the distortion of fear and grasping and aversion and delusion. You can practice this anywhere, anytime. Washing dishes after Christmas dinner, feeling the warm water on your hands, seeing the bubbles form and pop, being present to this simple act instead of lost in thoughts about something else, instead of rushing through it to get to something more important. That's practice. That's freedom available now. That's a thorn of restlessness removed. Sitting at the table with family, listening to someone tell a story you've heard many times before, actually listening, actually present, not pretending to listen while your mind is somewhere else, planning what you'll say, or thinking about your own stories, or judging the telling. That's practice. That's one thorn of self-centeredness removed. That's connection, that's freedom, that's nirvana in the midst of ordinary family life. Feeling irritation arise when things don't go as planned. Recognizing the irritation as it arises. Breathing with it, without suppressing it or acting it out. Seeing it as a formation created by expectations meeting reality. Not fighting it, but not being controlled by it either. Watching it transform and dissolve. That's practice. That's freedom. That's nirvana happening in the middle of imperfect circumstances. The Buddha never said this would be easy. He never promised that you'd remove all thorns permanently and never experience affliction again. He never said you'd reach a point where you're done, finished, complete, never needing to practice again. He said it's possible to experience freedom, to remove thorns, to know nirvana right now, and that this practice continues. The practice continues beyond this audio you're listening to. It continues into tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. It continues through easy times when everything flows, and difficult times when everything feels impossible. It continues through joy and sorrow, through clarity and confusion, through moments of deep peace and moments of intense challenge. But it's always available. Every breath is an opportunity to come home to yourself. Every step is an opportunity to be present instead of lost in thought. Every moment is an opportunity to recognize a thorn, anger, fear, loneliness, whatever affliction is present, and practice the gentle art of removing it. This is radically different from seeing nirvana as something that happens after death, after you've finally escaped from the suffering of existence through extinction. This is seeing nirvana as the natural state that's always available when you're not caught in affliction, when you're not seeing wrongly, when you're present to reality as it is, without the distortion of ignorance. Think about moments in your own life when you've experienced this freedom, even if you didn't call it nirvana or recognize it as anything special. Moments when you were so present to what you were doing that worry disappeared completely. Moments when you were so absorbed in beauty, a sunset painting the sky, music filling your awareness, someone's face in genuine laughter, that fear vanished and you touched something timeless. Moments when you were so grounded in your body, walking in nature, dancing, swimming, working with your hands, that the anxious thoughts quieted and you experienced simple being. Those moments weren't accidents or lucky breaks or gifts from outside. They were moments when thorns were temporarily removed, when conditions aligned for clear seeing, when you stopped clinging to past and future and touched the freedom that's always available underneath affliction. The practice is learning to access that freedom more reliably, more often, in more situations, not just when conditions happen to be perfect. Not because you've become someone different or achieved some special state, but because you've learned to recognize thorns and remove them, to recognize wrong seeing and correct it, to recognize when you're caught and know how to become free. The 5 mindfulness trainings help with this because they give you concrete guidelines for living in a way that doesn't create thorns in the first place. When you harm others deliberately, you create suffering for yourself. That's a thorn you have to carry. When you speak carelessly or cruelly, you create tangles in relationships, more thorns to navigate. When you consume mindlessly without awareness of what you're taking in, you create agitation in body and mind, more thorns lodged in your flesh. Living according to the trainings isn't about following rules to earn nirvana later, to build up merit that will pay off after death. It's about reducing the number of thorns you have to remove by not creating them in the first place, by living in alignment with how reality actually works. But even when you do create thorns, and you will, because you're human and learning and living in a complex world with countless conditions, the practice is there. Recognize the thorn. Don't deny it's there or pretend you're not in pain. Breathe with it. Understand what conditions created it. See it clearly as a formation, not as reality itself, not as who you are. Gently work to remove it, not through force, but through understanding and awareness. Experience the freedom when it releases, when the grip loosens, when suffering decreases, even slightly. This is nirvana as the Buddha actually taught it. Not eternal death after this life ends. Not extinction of your being. Not escape from existence into non-existence. But freedom from suffering available right now through clear seeing and gentle, continuous practice. As you move through what remains of this Christmas season and into the new year, you carry this practice with you. Not as a burden or obligation that weighs you down, but as a gift you've been given, the gift of knowing there's a way to be free, the gift of understanding that nirvana isn't far away in some distant realm, the gift of recognizing that every moment offers an opportunity to remove a thorn and experience freedom. When you're stuck in traffic and frustration arises, that's an opportunity to practice. When you're with someone difficult and aversion arises, that's an opportunity. When you're alone and loneliness arises, that's an opportunity. Not opportunities to judge yourself for having afflictions or to feel you're failing at practice, but opportunities to recognize thorns, breathe with them, understand them, and experience the freedom that comes when they release their grip, even slightly. The Buddha taught this practice because he discovered it works. Not as theory or philosophy or hope or belief, but as lived reality tested in his own experience. He removed thorns and experienced freedom. He taught others how to do the same. Those people removed thorns and experienced freedom. they taught others. And on for 2,500 years, people practicing this simple but profound teaching recognize affliction, understand it, release it, experience freedom. You're part of that lineage now. Not because you've joined some organization or taken vows or committed to anything formal or official, but because you're learning what the Buddha taught and you're practicing it in your actual life with its actual challenges. Every time you stop and breathe, instead of reacting automatically, you're practicing what the Buddha practiced. Every time you recognize a thorn and work to remove it with awareness and compassion, you're doing what countless practitioners have done for millennia. Every time you experience even a moment of freedom, even partial release from an affliction, you're touching the same nirvana they touched. This is not about becoming Buddhist or adopting a religious identity or joining a tradition. This is about learning to be free from suffering. And that learning is available to anyone, anywhere, any time who's willing to practice seeing clearly and removing thorns with patience and gentleness. As this audio ends, the practice doesn't end. You take it with you into whatever comes next, the meal you'll eat, the people you'll see, the tasks you'll do, the moments of ease and the moments of difficulty that make up an actual human life. And you have tools now that you didn't have before. You know that formations are temporary gatherings of conditions, not solid, permanent things you can cling to or need to fear losing. You know that nothing is born and nothing dies. Only transformation continues endlessly. You know that you are interbeing, not separate and alone, but connected to everything. You know that samsara is a notion that disappears in clear seeing, not a trap you're caught in. You know that nirvana is available now, not after death, through the simple but profound practice of removing thorns one by one. This Christmas, this moment, this breath, this is where freedom is. Not in the past you can't change, or the future you can't control. Not in some other realm after you die. Not in circumstances finally becoming perfect, which they never will. Here now, in your actual life as it actually is, with all its imperfection and difficulty and beauty and ordinariness and messiness and grace. The Buddha's gift to you is this teaching. The gift you give yourself is practicing it, bringing it from concept into lived experience. The freedom you experience when you do, that's nirvana, available in every moment you're willing to be present, to see clearly, to recognize thorns, and gently remove them one at a time. Breathe. Feel your body breathing. Know you're alive right now. Be here now, not somewhere else in thought. This is enough. This is everything. This is freedom. We've been together for 3 hours now, breathing, listening, exploring these teachings that have been passed down through centuries. Wherever you are in the world, whether it's morning or evening, whether you're alone or surrounded by others, whether Christmas has passed or is still approaching, you're part of this community of practice. The Buddha's teaching isn't complicated. Freedom starts with refreshing how you see. When you see formations as formations, when you see no birth and no death, when you see interbeing instead of separation, you're already free. May this Christmas season bring you home to yourself. May you find the island of self through your breath and your steps. May you experience the freedom that comes from seeing clearly, from removing thorns one by one, from touching the nature of no birth and no death. This space is always here for you. Whenever you need to come home, whenever you need to be reminded of what's true, whenever the thorns feel too numerous to count, you can return. Not to escape from life, but to see life more clearly, so you can live it more fully. The practice continues in your next breath, your next step, your next moment of awareness. You carry everything you need with you. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May you walk in mindfulness wherever this path takes you.